Good morning, everybody. I think that participants are actually coming in with 15 and growing here, 16, 17. So we got the green message. We even have the green chat. Everything seems to be
right. We're longing for spring, right? Exactly.
Yeah. And feel free. Is that coffee? I'm coffeeed up too.
Tea. I can only do one cup of coffee, or I'm way too jittery.
Yeah, I have
my first. Tea now.
I have my first cup. For those of you who are on, who you can hear us, as always, feel free to put something in the chat. Usually takes, this is where I said it usually takes a few minutes, so.
Sure. It goes out to the voice for a while.
Yes. So, good morning, Yamina. Thank you for sharing on the chat. Everybody else can share too. Oh, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Maybe you're a veteran and you know that I always say, ask if they can hear. Oh, good afternoon. Where are you listening from that it's afternoon? Oh, yes, the UK. Yes, we do have a phone. Oh, Ireland. Wow, you guys, so exciting. Happy Friday the 13th, Christina. That's exciting. I remember the first time that maybe Eleanor was you or Jenny was you, that people were like, good morning, from Chicago, that people were saying they're from the UK and, overseas. I was so excited. I'm like, okay, oh, wow, Paul, thank you. And I was like, how did you learn about this? And it like came from their school or something. I'm like, I don't even know. Or somebody found something on Eventbrite. So, I know you, Kay. I'm so glad you're here. Kay is a dear friend of a dear friend who's become now my dear friend.
That's how it works.
And a former educator. So, of course, in our circle of love, people that we appreciate so much, therapists, educators, all the people in this world. So, well, we still have a couple of minutes, and I know I can see the ticker going up. There's a lot of folks that are still signing on.
Yeah.
Our last webinar for the school year. Hard to imagine. So you get to hit it out of the park. No pressure, Nicole.
Okay.
Yes, I know. So then we all get the summer off to do our things. So I can't remember. Do you have summer plans? Not that you want to announce specific dates you're going to be gone or anything.
Just a lot of visiting family and friends, which I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's great.
A connection. Yeah.
And we have Dallas, Georgia. Good morning, Cheryl. We're so glad that you're here. So yes, we are. We offer our summer classes all summer, so writing and study skills, and so we're busy. I think we have like a week to rest our all weary bones. I know I'm not the only one who's weary. Everyone at this time of year, school year at least,
especially the past 2 years. Yeah, we are crawling to the finish this year.
Crawling to the finish line, and
yeah.
I know my daughter has another big project, and I'm like, really, a big project? It seems so late in the year now for a big project. Yeah. Oh, hi, Barbara. I was just in Park City. Had I known, then I could have reached out to you. That would have been nice to have a coffee with some people that we only know virtually. Right, Yamina, 21 more to go. Yes, thank you. My daughter's doing a countdown too. So, all right. Well, I know that we're gonna go ahead and get started because it is 9 o'clock, and we are an executive function center, so we have to be timely. And Nicole, of course, I will more formally introduce you here in a minute, but my name is Debbie Rosen, and I am one of the owners of the Study Pro. Lindsay Toms, who is in the background, is help monitoring the chat, and she also is an owner of the Study Pro. And so we're so excited that you're here. And this is our, as I mentioned earlier, our last webinar for the school year. But we're already having conversations about next year with some new and exciting folks as well. So we will hopefully see you back then. But for those of you who are new, and if you are new, feel free to share that on the chat. The Study Pro is an executive function and study skills center, and you may not be familiar with exactly what executive function is, but it looks like those things on the right. And I'm sure even if you're not exactly familiar with what executive function is, you've experienced it, because of course, we know at the end of the school year, even those with exceptional executive function still are struggling a bit to initiate and inhibit and self-monitor and shift and be more mentally flexible. And so what that means, of course, for us is that we focus on the process side of school. And there are a lot of very, very intelligent kids, nothing to do with IQ, that really just struggle because they're having a harder time organizing their thoughts or getting started in their work. And as I've learned from Nicole, there's always a need behind the behavior. And so really that's what we look at is, what are the underdeveloped skills in the areas of executive function and study skills, and then what strategies can we use to help students? And so we offer a number of things, including executive function coaching, which is one-on-one. We offer a homework center, which I'm sitting in here. We offer study skills courses and writing coaching, and we're doing a lot of that over the summer because it's a great time to do that. And in fact, tomorrow we have a few spaces left in our high school writing workshop. One of the things we love to do more than anything is to share strategies. We do a lot of free workshops on growth mindset and writing. We had our middle school writing workshop earlier, and we have a high school writing workshop tomorrow from 1 o'clock to 2:30. So if you're interested, you can email info, and then we can send you the link to register. And then, unfortunately, our friends from the UK and Ireland cannot come to that, but we will hopefully offer virtual ones in the future. And as I mentioned before I turn it over, we do have a lot of things going on this summer. We do believe that working on writing over the summer, especially from a process perspective, how to get started, how to feel more confident in your writing voice, how to organize your thoughts, how to do specific types of papers that you need to get ready for middle school or high school or even college, getting college essays done is something that's really helpful over the summer, as well as writing courses and then executive function and study skills courses, and then one-on-one coaching. So especially if you have summer work or if it was a difficult year or a transition that you're anticipating, this is all hopefully helpful. And then we have all of that under our programs menu, the first item in our programs menu for summer. So a couple of things. Thank you, Yamina. I'm glad to know your daughter's registered for tomorrow. And if you have no sound, it sounds like there are people that do have sound. What I would do is I have to write this in the chat because I have no sound, they can't hear me. If you have no sound, try to log out and in again and use Chrome if possible. So I'm sorry but it sounds like everybody else can hear me because there's comments associated with the things I'm saying. So with that, there's a lot of amazing things on the slide here. We're welcoming, of course, Nicole McGarry. There's a lot of great information on the slide here, but of course, what I want to say is much more personal because I met Nicole. I was telling her this morning that I was looking back through my emails, and the first email I have from you, Nicole, is from 2013. So my son was, I don't know what, because I can't do the math that quickly under pressure, but he is now 22, almost 23, right? Unbelievable. Wow. Going to be a senior in college. Little plug for gap years for everybody who's out there and questioning whether or not they think it's a good idea. I'm always happy to talk about that. But it was exceptional to have an extra year. He actually got a couple of extra years, but not from a gap year. But and he is doing exceptionally well. But if it wasn't for Nicole, and I have to, of course, say there were others, but really Nicole was our rock. Not only from the perspective of working with David for many, many years and guiding us, but as a coach to me. And I know something that you have near and dear to your heart, Nicole, is helping parents when kids are having challenges of a lot of in a lot of areas, but especially in the case of my son, ADHD, and that's a specialty of yours. And I will say there were a number of, I'll say two other things. There were a number of things that you said that we use here at the Study Pro all the time. One is about animal brain, which I know you'll be talking about, and recognizing when people are animal brain and you just can't talk to them, which is a little bit of a preview of what you'll be talking about. Also, the fact that this whole idea of the need behind the behavior is that when we see behaviors from our kids, that behind that really there's something else. And if we're reacting just to the behavior, that's not really solutions oriented. And I think Lindsay and I will share that that is just become kind of the nucleus of how we operate here at the Study Pro. So you have so much, I give you so much credit, and I want to do that publicly because you've really been so helpful. And one last thing I will say is one of the other things, which out of context a lot of parents might react to this, but this whole idea that your kids don't always have to be happy. And I was like, yes.
Definitely not.
I love that. I love that that's the case. That it's like sometimes you have to like draw your boundaries, and if your kids aren't happy, then you just have to say it's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give you a chance to bring your slides up. And I just wanted to give you the warmest welcome and tell everybody you're in for a treat, because I and a circle of friends who will not be named have come to rely on Nicole's expertise. And we're very excited about what you have to share today. And a huge thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I am a huge fan of the webinars and the trainings that Study Pro offers. I think it's such an amazing service. Of all those lovely things on my slide, I think the most important to me is that I'm a therapist and I'm a mom. I like to listen to other experts and other people who are putting ideas out there, so that I'm invited here and I have this opportunity. It feels really wonderful to me. So thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be with you all today. And I hope on this, it's rainy here, it's kind of dark and cloudy and rainy here. I hope on this Friday morning, we all walk away feeling like we have more hopeful ideas, strategies, and an acceptance of conflict being a part of the human experience. And if we can understand it on a better level and understand our patterns within it, that can help us to reduce its intensity, reduce its frequency in our families. We're all here because conflict is painful. And we want some ideas, right, about what to do. So I hope everyone is hearing me okay. And if not, let us know in the chat. Okay. So let me give us a little roadmap of where I'm hoping to go today. And then we, of course, will have, thank you. We, of course, will have question and answer at the end. So I'm going to try to save a bunch of time for that. So my goal today is to talk about conflict and the predictable and knowable patterns that can occur within conflict, that occur both internally, so within ourselves, and then what it looks like in relationship when two people, right, and their patterns are coming into a conflict. And the idea behind that is sort of so we can find the exit doors, right? Like if we're going on this ride and it no longer is where we want to be, where are opportunities to exit, sort of get off this ride and to reset and to redo where we are. And so understanding conflict and its cycles first, looking for exit doors, and then I am a trained DBT therapist. I found in the last 5-7 years of my practice that parents and kids and all of us were looking for practical ideas about how to manage big emotions, how to get unstuck from our looping and painful thought patterns, and how can we create alternatives to our habitual ways of responding to pain or stress. And for me personally, I found the DBT model to it just spoke to me. It made sense. My initial training is as an attachment therapist. So a lot of focus on relationship and connection and how we learn about ourselves through connection. And what I loved about DBT was it brings in the practical pieces of cognitive behavioral therapy, like what do I do and what is the strategy? But it does it in this really lovely, validating way. It's about the relationship to train skills. And so for me, it was a perfect fit. So we will talk about conflict, but we will use a couple concepts from DBT to help us think about some strategies to exit. So that's where we're headed today. All right, let me move to this first slide. Okay, so when we are in conflict, it happens really fast. It's often an internal, unconscious process that feels internally like it can go from 0 to 60, right? There may be a triggering event, something that occurs, a comment that is said, and all of a sudden we're at action or impulse, right? So it feels like there was no time in between. But the truth is, there is a rolling, right, move from the triggering event to our thoughts or our interpretations or the storyline or the thing we're saying to ourselves about that triggering event that just happened, which creates an emotional response. It's a chemical change in our body, right? Our central nervous system goes whoop, like gets the little feels, right? There goes that little conflict rash, like here it comes, right? And we experience that emotion as a physical sensation, right? Like sweaty palms, racing heart, right? And then we act, right? Or there's something on the outside that we do or we say that potentially by this point someone else is seeing or recognizing or noticing. So at that action or impulse with parents who are here, right, that is oftentimes our point of discipline because we are seeing some kind of outward behavior that we're responding to. Your kid might be yelling at you, they might be dysregulated, they might have crawled into their bed and they are completely offline and they're not functioning. And so that's the behavior that you see, sort of a shutting down. And what's important to recognize is that this is cyclical, or in this particular example, I like to talk about climbing the ladder of conflict, because one person's action in the conflict can be another triggering event for the person that they're in conflict with. And now we're off to the races, right? So one person is triggering, the other person is responding, it triggers again. And before we know it, we are really, really high in our conflict cycle. So we want to understand that point so that as parents or participants in a disagreement, we have opportunity to know where can I go back in and intervene. We're going to talk a lot about that, but it is earlier in the process, and our goal is to really try, instead of having a reaction, to have a response, right? Which will require that we sort of get control of the storyline, the emotional response, understanding our physical symptoms so we can name it. So, okay, so what does this look like, right? So possible triggering event, you know, my kid is frantically yelling from another room, like, where's my uniform, right? Like triggering event, like, okay, that message received, a negative thought. First is, how do I know? Why is that my responsibility, right? Or, oh crap, like now he's gonna lose it. Like we are about to go down this rabbit hole of dysregulation, and the next 10 to 15 minutes are gonna be like hanging on by toenails, and this is gonna be awful, right? So negative thought leads to emotional response, frustration. Why is this happening right now in my life? Why do I have to deal with this? Like I was just drinking my coffee. it's ready to go. Like, and now this is on my plate. Another emotional response, fear. How bad is this going to get? Like, where is this going to go? Right. And what's it going to require of me to get things calmed down? Physical symptoms associated with this might be I'm breathing faster, my palms are sweaty, my heart is going, right? There's a lot of activation in my system. And so then the action might be to say, it's not my job, track your stuff, right? Could be that reaction. And as you notice, there's emotion in my face and my tone as I'm having that reaction. Perfectly understandable reaction, right? But it's there, which could possibly lead to another triggering event, right? So, or you could say, do you need my help finding a uniform, right? Like asking the question in a different type of way, right? So what does this look like in another scenario? You have to walk in and tell your kid it's time to get off the phone, it's time to turn it in, right? So this is a triggering event for your child, right? And that the first negative thought might be, oh, my boyfriend is totally going to break up with me. Like, I sent this message an hour ago and they have left me on read and have not responded, and it's over. Like, we're done. This is like horrible, right? Total cutoff. Emotions would be panic and fear, right? Dysregulation, desperation to try to make contact or to feel like you have to fix this or figure it out. Again, faster breathing, sweaty palms, sick to their stomach. They might be jittery, just all over the place because they're thinking this means, sure, breakup. And the action is like to scream at your parents that you never let me have a life. You have no idea. Like, nobody else's parents takes the phone. Nobody else's parents has a limit, right? Like, of when they have to turn the phones. You're so uncool and you just don't get it. And right. So that's the action or the impulse, right? So again, the idea here is if we just focus on the action or impulse, we miss all the data of the need behind the behavior. Why is that happening, right? And that is where we can get into an accidental cycle of just one trigger after another, where we stay stuck in that conflict cycle. So another way of looking at this is there's the painful experience, right? Then there's our interpretations and our generalizations about it, right? Like, so if my kid can't find their uniform for the umpteenth time and they're saying it in a really rude way to me, a possible interpretation of that is they are clearly never going to go to college. They can't even find their uniform, right? Like, they're a disaster. Who would ever want to marry this person? And I'm a terrible mother. Like, holy cow, right? Like, and if you're in my position, you're also a therapist, you're like, I'm a horrible therapist and a horrible mom, right? Like, so you get like the double whammy, just like, I'm supposed to know what to do about this stuff, right? So there's these quick generalizations and interpretations, and the foundation of them are usually some kind of internal thought that we are not enough or something is deeply flawed about our kid. And by the way, that's also our fault, right? Or if it's not, why can't they just get it together, right? So we have these limiting beliefs about ourselves or about the other person. And that leads to some really skewed thinking. If I think my kid is not going to be able to go to college or have a wonderful marriage in their life at some point, my reaction to this uniform situation is going to look pretty different, right? Than if I'm just thinking about the uniform, right? I'm like, it's really big in my mind. Like, this is like critical life skill here, right? So my skewed thinking leads to more fear-based choices. I am coming at this like this is life or death, right? And so my actions are intense. My tone is intense. My tone is saying, this is a really, really big deal, and you need to get this together right now, which, by the way, creates another painful experience for the kid. And now they're having interpretations and generalizations about themselves and you and how awful you are, right? And here come the limiting beliefs and here comes the spiral, right? So I want everybody just take a beautiful sacred pause here for a second. And I want you to call into mind, right? A child in your life, maybe it's a partner or a spouse or a friend, in which you recently or currently are having a conflict cycle, right? Like something that didn't feel good, right? Got negative emotions stirred up. And I want you to take a moment and go through this cycle. Like, name the painful experience for yourself. What was it? Is it the tone of how your kid spoke to you? Was it someone forgetting to do something that they promised they would do? And you're having a reaction to that, right? See if you can identify what are the interpretations, the generalizations, and the limiting beliefs that you are holding about that painful experience. Really getting into that. What am I believing? What is the storyline I am telling about this experience? And then if you are right in the cycle and there have been choices made or actions taken, what were those choices? What were the actions you took? Remembering that sometimes actions look like freezing, right? They're not always out there. Sometimes they're stuck. So maybe your action was to freeze, to move away, to shut down, right? Okay. Thank you for taking that moment. We are going to do a lot of experiential things throughout today because I really want us to have a chance in a safe environment together to visit conflict, right? So we can explore a little bit more about what it really feels like inside our bodies. Okay. So as I was just saying, there are levels of reactivity in our body, right? And some of us trend towards one side and some can trend toward the other. And we all have access to all of this, right? So we talk about the window of tolerance. That is sort of this beautiful bandwidth in the middle where I can receive information, I can engage in my world, I can have relationships, I'm able to take in data and give out data, and there's this lovely interaction between me and the world. When something upsetting happens, or we're disappointed, or we're sad, or we're in grief, we can get different kinds of arousal. One type is hyperarousal, right? So if you look at these little water pictures, this is a really stormy, raging sea, right? This is emotional overwhelm. This can look like panic. This can look like feeling very unsafe, racing thoughts, anger, deep panic and fear, right? Like this one is very hyper aroused, right? The other side of that is hypoarousal. And this is where the system is also overloaded. It's at the same level of stress, but instead of feeling these hyper emotions, we go numb. There's like no feeling, no energy. Thoughts are very difficult to string together. The whole system is just sort of shutting down and disconnected. A lot like depression, right? It's really important to know that the level of stress and distress that's happening is the same, whether you look like the person that's laying in bed or you look like, the person that's screaming and raging and more external with it. And the idea is we want to be able to recognize in any conflict cycle when we have moved into hyper or hypoarousal, we are out of our window of tolerance. We are out of a productive point in the conflict, and it doesn't make sense to keep going, right? It really doesn't make sense. This is where we have climbed the ladder so far, right, that anything that happens there has the potential for just more hurt and more of the conflict cycle. Okay. So Debbie already showed some of this earlier, but for some of us who have children or family members who may struggle with certain deficits in their development of executive function for whatever reason, could be ADHD, ASD, anxiety, depression, right? Whatever reason, or that they're just young, right? By the way, most of these executive functions take till like 27 to fully develop, and some days I'm still working on them myself. So this is a developmental process. But if you have a family member or even yourself that is struggling with lagging development in some of these skills, we can imagine how much harder the conflict cycle is, right? When we just remember that we're talking about activation, like prioritizing. Ooh, right? So maybe I pick everything to have a conflict about because I just can't decide what's really important, what's not important. Focus, right? Like I lose focus and that hurts somebody else's feelings, and then I'm constantly getting negative feedback, right? But I also like to just remind here that emotions and emotional regulation, being able to modulate my emotional response, is an executive function, right? So often we think about executive function just within the academic realm or the work realm, right? And it's so much about our ability to regulate what is happening emotionally within our body. So there's some common qualities, right, that you might recognize if you or someone that you love might struggle with some lagging skills. You can have emotions that are quicker, they're stronger, and they just last a lot longer, right? So it feels like the trigger is really quick, it's really big, and that person struggles mightily once it's going to sort of return to baseline, right? It's very easy to get triggered into fight or flight, right? These small triggers become very big. There can be qualities of perseveration or ruminating, that looping, that getting stuck comes back to abilities to modulate, to attend to the most important piece of information, right? And so we can get stuck there, which can lead to rigidity, right? Just, I can only see plan A and I can't get to plan B or C. And then lastly is just, I have a hard time monitoring my own reaction or what's happening inside me, right? Like I'm driving and in my head, I'm like amazing, like I'm doing great and everybody else is having a problem, right? But actually you're doing terribly. Like you just cut somebody off, like you're not paying as close attention as you think you really are, right? So your self-monitoring is off. So if you're in a conflict and all you recognize is the triggering action of the other person, and they're like, get your shoes, because you didn't hear the first 3 times that they said, please get your shoes. It's time to line up at the door and please get your shoes, right? Like all you see is that last one come in and you're like, right? You haven't monitored yourself. You don't know. So you're just reacting like, this is so unfair. You're so rude. You're so mean, blah, blah. Fill in. Okay. So Debbie mentioned this earlier, right? One of my favorite authors and psychologists, actually like a neuropsychologist who combines attachment, like relationships with brain development. Ooh, like so cool. So anyway, Daniel Siegel, and he has this really brilliant, really simplified model, which I think many of you know, which is called the hand brain. And I just love how simple it is. So you just take your hand, right? You tuck your thumb in, you curve your fingers around, and he says, look, you have a brain. Like, here's your brain, right? So he does this to explain exactly that this thumb section is our limbic system, basically the feeling control center of your brain. When you curve your fingers around top, that's your prefrontal cortex. That's your thinking brain, right behind your eyebrows, right? Because our brains develop from back to front, bottom to top, the last part of our brain to develop fully is that prefrontal cortex. And it's literally not done until 26, 27, 28 years old, right? So we want to recognize that when there is a really big trigger, the amygdala, the fear, the fight or flight response gets activated. I'm in a conflict. It is not uncommon to flip our lid, right? And this is what Debbie was talking about when we're like animal brain. Literally, this is like snake brain, just threat. And we respond to the threat, and it's not rational. It's not reasonable. You're not able to ask questions. Your child or your spouse or your friend that you're in conflict with is not able to rationally see your point of view. Well, does that make sense now? Because the thinking part of their brain is completely offline. So if we have two flipped lids talking to each other, we can imagine there's a lot of problems that are going on there, right? So we want to look at ways in which we can disengage, and through training and practice, make it less likely that we flip our lid in the first place. If you have anxiety, depression, ADHD, there are some neurological differences that we can do things about, right? Like, this is not doom and gloom. This is hopeful, but it takes practice, and it can literally help that brain stay integrated when you have a really big emotion. Right? So that's part of being able to decide, again, where are the exit doors? If you are talking to a flipped lid, exit, like chicken door, run. We're not going to keep like, no, it is time to go, because we're going to get into hurtful, impulsive, reactivity versus responding, right? So dealing with the flipped lid, we're going to go now to the DBT structure so we can talk more about one strategy. There's so many ways, but we have limited time. So we're really just going to go into one particular option today. All right. So many of you have heard of dialectical behavioral therapy. Some of you might even have done some training or some therapy in this way. But for those of you who are not familiar, DBT is an evidence-based treatment model. As I said, I love that it is both relational and it has a lot of cognitive behavioral, structured, skills-based ideas and training behind it. And it is built upon 4 core competencies, basically 4 areas that we all need in order to manage conflict, manage our emotions, and to live sort of productive, connected lives. So there's mindfulness, right? Distress tolerance, being able to emotionally regulate, and our interpersonal efficacy, our ability to take what we know about our own emotions and regulating our own emotions and put that into relationship. So DBT will always assume that clients or kids or family members are doing the best they can in this moment. But if we're having a lot of reactivity, or if we're having conflictual, impulsive actions, there's a lagging skill, right? It says, okay, so we need to get in there and teach and train some new strategies, some new ways of understanding our habitual ways, like how do we typically respond to pain or stress, and what are some new skills that we can learn to help us manage that in a different way, all from a place of non-judgment. Right? We all have this stuff. One of my favorite things about training and teaching groups in DBT is I get to review it myself all the time. And when we're on, mindfulness weeks or whatever, I'm just there with it and recognizing it. These are such helpful skills in all of our lives. Dialectic for those who haven't had background in dialectical behavioral therapy, I think it's kind of an awful name. Like, it sounds like so overly clinical. I'm like, what is that? Like, that sounds terrible. I need dialectical therapy. It just means it's an attempt to look at a dichotomy, right? Like, two opposing things, two opposite concepts can be absolutely true at the same time, right? So I can feel deeply fearful and nervous about giving a webinar and super excited and happy and connected about the opportunity. Like, both are true at the exact same time and both are valid. And as you notice, when we begin to break down the emotions in a conflict, so often we have polarization going on. A kid can feel so ticked off that you have put, a curfew in place and that no one else's parents have a curfew, right? Like, and also deeply loved and cared for, not in a place that they're going to consciously say out loud till maybe they're 30, right? But feel like you care about me. They care because they also see kids who are at all these parties or whatever whose parents don't seem to care, don't seem to have any say in what they do or whatever. And that has a different feeling to it too, right? So we can have two opposing emotions at the same time, and both are valid and both are true in that moment. Okay, so today specifically, we're going to talk about distress tolerance. Okay, what is that, right? So DBT and life in general will teach us, right, that it's an important skill to be able to be uncomfortable. So when Debbie said, it's okay for your kid to be unhappy, I'm like, oh, yes, it's actually incredibly necessary for us to learn how to tolerate being uncomfortable, disappointed, isolated, scared and worried, right? These are natural, normal human emotions. And we have to learn how to ride that emotional wave because that's life. That's part of being human, right? So I think it's helpful here as a first level skill for families and kids to be able to utilize some kind of stress scaling system for recognizing where am I on my distress scale, right? Like, how upset am I, right? In DBT, the distress tolerance skills, this category of skills, is utilized and saved for our 8, 9s, or 10s. I am at my highest level of distress. I am very reactive. I have flipped my lid, right? Like, these skills are specifically for this highest level of distress, right? Now, we'd like ideally to live our life somewhere between a 4 and a 5, right? That means I'm having new experiences. I'm in that window of tolerance. I'm not going offline. I'm learning, but I'm also not too comfy. Those of us who have kids with anxiety, they would love to tell us that life needs to be at like a 1.5. No growth is happening there, right? Like, we absolutely have to have exposure to a little bit of discomfort in order for us to feel competent and able to engage in the world. So being able as an individual and also as a family to recognize a flipped lid, to recognize when we're at an 8, 9, or 10, so we can use a specific set of strategies in that moment is important, right? Talking and dialogue and collaboration happens when we're at a 4, 5, or 6, right? It does not happen when we're at an 8, 9, or 10. So why tolerate painful feelings? Our urges, right? Our painful feelings come with that action-oriented piece at the top of the scale, right? We want to do something about it. Well, it's because pain is a part of life. It can't always be avoided. If we're going to love and be vulnerable and be brave in connection, we are going to experience loss. There is going to be grief involved at some point, right? And if we can't deal with our pain, then we act impulsively in a way that can lead to more hurt. Hurting of ourselves, hurting of someone else, getting less of what we want, right? All of that. So DBT would outline that there are sort of 5 ways we can respond when something is happening that we don't like or is making us uncomfortable. The first is to figure out how to solve the problem. So if I'm at a 5, 6, in that middle range, I should be trying to figure out how to solve it. I have access to my thinking brain. I can collaborate, I can coordinate, I can talk through solutions, right? If that's not working, I might need to change how I feel about the problem. So I have coordinated with my science teacher. I have asked for an extension. They are completely unreasonable. Like, that is not working. I might need to change how I feel about it, which might be, well, I've done a good job of advocating, and this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to get a B- or a C, and I'm going to have to change my interpretation, my emotional reaction, or the storyline I'm telling myself emotionally about that. Right? 3 is to accept it. That's the piece that we're going to do next and what we're going to spend the rest of today on. 4th is to stay miserable. Don't use any skill at all. Just stay in the looping and the complaining and the shooting myself to death, like this shouldn't be happening and blah, blah. Or 5th is to make it worse. Act on my impulse. Be uncomfortable and do that habitual way of responding to pain, or I yell, or I get in my bed, or I do whatever. All right, so what is acceptance? What is radical acceptance? So it's raining. I don't like rain. I wish it wasn't raining. My day would be so much better if it wasn't raining right now. My day is totally ruined. Every day is like this. It's always like this. Why does it always rain when all I want is for it to be sunny? That would be suffering, right? That would be refusing to, right? Staying miserable. Acceptance is, it's raining. Yep. Right? It's being with what is. Being with what is, right? So radical acceptance is truly about our relationship with the truth of this moment, right? So my kid is flipping out because they can't find their uniform. Yep. Like, whew, right? Yep means I'm not like, he always does this, shouldn't be doing this, this is not my job, right? Like all of that storyline, those thoughts, which are just our body's attempt to gain control of this moment, right? It's, of course, we're having these thoughts, these negative thoughts that are our attempt to stay in control of the situation. But if you notice when we're doing that, we're tightening. We're getting tight, we're getting tense, we're resisting the reality that our kid is flipping out, right? Our kid is flipping out. And so the idea is, in order to respond instead of react, I must first be able to sit with what is. It's raining. My spouse is screaming at me. Does this mean I love this? This is okay. I'm just going to meditate until I feel like this is all right. No. What this is the opportunity to be with, really be with the reality and the truth of this moment, the negative thoughts, the storyline, the physical sensations that are going on, so I can respond and not react, right? So there's this idea of the pain of 2 arrows. Some of you might have heard about this analogy. When we're walking through life, we can't always avoid the pain of that first arrow. Like my kid is flipping out about their, uniform or whatever. We can't avoid that pain, but we can avoid the pain of the second arrow, which is the tensing and the tightening and the reactivity that says this shouldn't be happening. And yet it is. And there is a great deal of peace and freedom when we can be with the truth of what is in this moment. Not because we're okay with it, not because we're saying, yes, flip out at me, yell at me all you want, but because we're saying when I tense against it, I react instead of respond. from a place of loving kindness, thoughtfulness, right? I want to stay in touch with my thinking brain and not get reactive and flip my own lid. So we have more pain going back and forth. That's really how we're looking at radical acceptance. DBT will call it willfulness and willingness, right? So willfulness is that, like, this shouldn't be happening, right? Trying to change a situation that can't be changed, or like wanting to change something that you can't, right? Willingness is being able to do just it, no more and no less. And at the start of that conflict, at the point of that action or triggering event, one of the most important things we can do is to be with. Pause, pause, pause. What is happening? What is happening? Okay. And here's just another cool graphic that I saw online that I just love this. I think water is so, right, like it relates so much to emotion because we're fluid and it's constantly changing. And I will use these analogies in my work with kids all the time about, we're going to kind of teach you how to surf. We can't help that you have like really big waves and your ocean is like, woo, fantastic. But we can get better surfing skills so you don't crash out. Right? So being able to ride the wave of our emotion, be with it instead of try to control it, right? But to allow it to sort of wash through us. It's just a feeling. At the end of the day, it's just a feeling. It's a chemical reaction to a storyline, that limiting belief that we are holding. And if we can ride that wave, tolerate that discomfort. I'm a bad mom. They're never going to go to college. No one's ever going to want to date them, right? Look at that behavior, right? If I can just ride that wave, I am coming into a true awareness of just deep caring, fear for my child. If I reacted first, it's just irritation and anger. It's not my problem. Where's your uniform, right? Like, but underneath that anger, maybe fear, deep caring. So many of us put so much energy, right, into our kids and wanting them to do well and wanting to see them reach their potential. Deep, deep caring, right? But I really just need to respond in this moment to the uniform. I don't need to worry about college, right? I just need to work in this moment on finding the uniform. Okay, so we are super lucky in this area to have a wonderful psychologist and meditation teacher. Tara Brach she's just wonderful. She has written some really beautiful books on radical acceptance, True Refuge, Radical Compassion is her more recent book. And she talks about this concept of RAIN. This is how we do the steps of radical acceptance. This is how we learn to be with the truth of this moment so we can be less reactive and more responsive. You can find wonderful podcasts and classes, tons and tons of teachings and free, beautiful offerings at her website, tarabrach.com. And we're just going to practice this together for a little bit. So let me explain what the acronym RAIN stands for. The first part of that is the R, which is to recognize. And the important question to ask yourself in this moment, yes, Carla's saying I absolutely love her podcast. Me too. I love, love, love to listen to her, is to recognize what is happening in this moment. What is happening inside my body in this moment? If emotions are driven by storylines, and if emotions are a chemical, physiological sensation, can I get in touch with my racing heart? Can I feel the tightening in my chest? Can I feel like the bottom dropping out of, my belly? And can I allow it? The A. Can I just be with that? Not try to change it. Insight Meditation Community of Washington, absolutely. can I be with that just as it is, right? And when I have been able to recognize and allow, then I can investigate with a gentle or curious attention, right? This is the non-judgmental exploration, like, okay, fear of not going to college, fear of not having a successful life path, fear of not the loving, beautiful sides of my reactive kid being loved and valued, right? Like, can I just investigate what is under what's happening in my body right now? And the last piece is to nurture. Can I bring alongside a nurturing presence to myself and to others? Right. So can I nurture and be kind in my mind that my kid's amygdala is just really reactive, and that must be really hard for them, right? Like, wow, that'd be a really hard way to walk through life. So can I find that piece of nurture and non-judgment? And this is a process, a cycle that we must work over and over again, right? It's a practice. At my office, I talk about going to the brain gym. We're just going to get some reps in, right? Like, if I can just be with, right? If I can be with this yucky feeling and not react and investigate and offer nurturing and kindness toward this discomfort, that is a rep for distress tolerance. I have just learned that I can ride that wave and not crash out. Now, sometimes we have to be with the fact that we were doing really good. We were surfing, we were making it, and then we just, it was so close. I almost made it, and then I lost it right at the end, and I went back to my habitual way of responding. Okay, fine, right? Just recognize, I wiped out. Bummer, right? Okay, what's happening now? Anger, getting spun up again, right? Like, shaking up that mind jar again. Here we go, right? It's cyclical, right? Any moment of coming into awareness is an opportunity for that exit door, right?
So,
To
Nicole,
bring, yes.
I'm so sorry. I had to add something here. I hope you don't mind.
I don't.
So I wanted to mention a little trick, a little hack, in case it's useful to anybody else, that I've used with Rain. So, and I'll just put it into context. So if you're sitting in the car driving to school and your child is like being super rude to you, and you're recognizing like, oh my gosh, they're being so rude, and okay, they're being rude, right? And then like in your brain, you're like, they can't speak to me that way, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then it is that the hardest bridge, at least for me, is that like, why might he or she be feeling that way? Like, investigating. I know it's not exactly the Tara Brach investigating, but the N is, I've taken this N to be not like, this is all happening right here. This is all right here, all these emotions. And that doesn't have to be part of me. That is not how I have to react. And I know that's not nurture, but I've used this little trick to be like, that doesn't have to be me. I can put that aside. And I will tell you that 99% of the time, when I'm going through that in my brain, number one, it distracts me from reacting. Number two, the air of the yelling sits in the car, and that person who's yelling, never to protect the innocent, says, I'm sorry I yelled at your mom. Because there's there's nothing that I've climbed, there's no ladder I've climbed, there's no tennis ball I've thrown back, there's nothing that happens so that he or she will then get mad, and we just go back and forth and then drop off at school and everybody's angry. And so I just wanted to share that 1 minute to that maybe it would help someone else in that context. Because the nurture, I think it started because I could never remember what the N stood for. After all of my Tara,
the R and the A.
Yeah, Tara Brachnis. But I just remembered her saying, this doesn't have to be my reaction. I'm allowed to. It's not. So anyway, I just thought I would share that.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that, because that is you being in the R and the A, just allowing. right? Which is so often we're like, I can't allow that. Like, I can't let that happen in my car, right? And if we react from that place, like you said, there typically tends to be just a lot of anger, dialogue, whatever, conflict. But in this scenario, when you're engaged in recognizing what's coming up for you, allowing, you're saying, I don't have to react. I can just see it for what it is, right? Like, oof, discomfort, anger, frustration, fear, sadness, right? Like whatever you're naming, right? Just allowing it. And as you do that, you automatically invite the other person into their own moment of potentially recognize and allow. And then your daughter was like, ooh, sorry, right? So when we overreact in a moment, we take up all the air in the room. And now we're all just climbing the ladder together instead of there being any pause, any moment, right? They love that story. They love that story. Okay, so let's do this together. Let's do this really quick, and then we will have time for Q&A as well. So go back to that painful experience you identified in the loop earlier and bring it up into your mind's eye. Like really bring it into your body, that conflict, that painful experience that you thought of earlier. And ask yourself, what is happening right now? Right now, today, this morning, sitting in this chair, this Friday morning, what is happening? What are the thoughts, feelings? Name it in your body. Assess. Am I saying yes or no to this? Just sit, observe, 15 seconds. Now investigate. What are you longing for? What is the function of this experience right now in this moment? What is this experience teaching me? Where is it leading me? And then the very last one, what is the kind thing I can do in this moment? Are there words? We're in the car, there might be no words. Or action, might just be pause, no words. What is the kind thing I can do in this moment? Kind to self and kind to other. Right? And just this last slide here, I invite us all to think, what is one thing you are working to radically accept about your child, your partner, that friend you're having a conflict with right now? What is something that if you could get to a place of radical acceptance, meaning just to be with, without reacting, but responding? How about your relationship, right? What are you working on there? And can you imagine if you gave yourself the space and the nurturing to explore that, how that might impact the conflict cycle the next time? Because they're patterns, right? They happen and we tend to get triggered by similar things, right? How that might support you the next time. So I will stop sharing now. I thank you so much for your time and attention. And I would love to welcome any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. That was really helpful. And I will just summarize a little bit based on what Maggie said, is that I cannot control other people's thoughts and behaviors, only myself. And I will extend that to say that we can't ask our children to change if we aren't. I think so many of us, we come to these webinars and we seek out information hoping for like exactly what to do and say, and maybe don't expect that there is some work and some change on it. And so I think that, having gone through a lot of these experiences, of course, with you, and you understand our background, it really wasn't until I radically accepted that I needed to be the one 100% to change myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think that makes such a big difference. And so There was a question that Bruno had asked about a case of dealing with a 9 and 10-year-old. So we have these repetitive events, telling them 10,000 times to do things over and over again. So how do we deal with that in the context of, DBT or the advice that you have? And then there's some other questions that have come in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the nature, right, of the developing brain and lagging skill, is that there's a missing skill, there's a missing ability in the child to successfully get off the looping of whatever behavior they're doing repetitively and over again. And the idea, here today, if we're just talking about radical acceptance or distress tolerance, is improving your ability as a parent to be with that behavior enough so you can investigate, can we find more of the core need behind that behavior? Like, if I pause, could I recognize not just the action or the impulsive thing that happens over and over again, but what is the lagging skill that causes my child to do that thing, that behavior over and over again? And when all other hope is gone, right, I say to myself in my head, this is a brain rep. How many times do I have to do an exercise at the gym before I actually feel strong and see a result, right? So if I have a child with really lagging skills in impulse control, really lagging skills in emotional regulation and not saying that nasty thing, and here we go again, and this is number 4 or 5 of the day, the hack in my mind is to say, well, I have to first recognize and be with 4 times today. Like, right? I have to allow that to be the reality. I have to allow that to be the truth of this moment. Pull along my ability to grieve, feel frustration, fear for my kid that's done this 4 times today, and to my way of nurturing, the kind thing in my mind is to say, well, that was 4 brain reps today. That was 4 chances to practice, because there are some days where we just get a lot of opportunity to practice. And if I'm in recognizing and allowing, I notice when by the 4th time I have lost it, I'm done, like with all your brain reps, I want to get out of the gym for today. And it might be that I take time. I pause, I move away. I'm not available for that rep. There will be more tomorrow that I can practice, right? But I don't want to cause harm. And I don't necessarily want there to be conflict, because remembering, conflict doesn't lead to growth. It's just a flashpoint where my expectation and needs and your expectations and needs are not matching up, right? So the conflict is not where the teaching or the learning happens. Like, this brain doesn't learn, right? So if our ultimate goal is to change a behavior that happens repetitively getting into conflict about it is not getting us where we want to go. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think there's sometimes a question, I find this in a lot of these webinars, there's a question of like validation, or in this case, nurturing, does that really mean like, okay, just letting the kids do anything they want, or just accepting that behavior? Right. And so there was a specific question about, okay, if the kind choice is to say nothing or say nothing to my daughter, does that mean she goes out all weekend and doesn't complete her work that was due today, but failed to complete last night? So what's your reaction to that, Nicole?
It's such a good question, and it's the most common question, right? Does radical acceptance mean passivity and just letting, the world go willy-nilly and our kids run wild and our, spouses be abusive or whatever, right? Like, and the answer is no.
No
of
way.
course, as humans, we will act. We must act, right? And at times, if my presentation is not to be like that hailstorm, right? Like the hyper arousal, but maybe I'm more frozen. I'm like I go into my bed, or I, shut down, then activation is really an important part of coming back online. The difference is, have I taken a moment to pause when my daughter's saying, I'm going out and I'm not listening to you, to come from a place of responding and not reacting? Am I not climbing the ladder? It may be, here is the boundary. And your choices around my boundary will have consequences and will have outcomes, right? But me yelling about it, right? Or me going in my room and just ignoring you because I can't deal with it, right? Those are ways of reacting and not responding, right? So the idea here is if I can get unhooked from my emotional trigger, I am going to make better choices about how I communicate the consequence or what needs to happen next, right? It is not to just allow them to, do whatever they want. It is to not be conflictual whenever possible in setting the boundary and recognizing that at certain ages, there's limited control in certain moments, and parenting becomes a long game, right? Like, we can't always win every single battle. Sometimes they're going to make choices that just terrify us, make us so enraged. Again, fear, this precious being doing this nut thing out there, putting themselves at risk or whatever. And not every moment are we going to be able to control or get the upper hand, but we want the long game, which is you made that really scary choice. So now we might not have as many freedoms or opportunities for you to make potentially catastrophic mistakes. So sort of what do I need to do to align myself with your current level of independent regulation, right? And I'm making it sound easy. It's not, but it's about getting unhooked from the emotional reactivity that is that second arrow. Raising teenagers who are reactive is painful, really painful. And if we can take the emotional volume down, that helps, right? It helps us.
Yeah. And so it really kind of goes on two paths, right? There's I have my boundaries as a parent, and these are our values as a family, and this is the result, of you stepping over that boundary. So there are results of that. There are consequences of that. But I can have that reactive relationship with my child, which is going to tear us further and further apart. Or I can be in control of my own emotions, and that doesn't mean that I'm not accepting that, but hopefully that will preserve the relationship. And I think that's always the goal, right?
And as you mentioned earlier, which I thought was so brilliant, Debbie, is it allows the child to be with their portion, right? Like sometimes a kid's job is to get you to flip out so they can go, look at you, you're a mess, right? Like, and now they are not sitting with the messness that was their reaction, right? So whose distress tolerance is this moment, right? Like probably both of us. But if I can tolerate mine, then you have to sit with yours, because I'm not giving you a show to distract you from what you really need to be thinking about right now.
Exactly. And so there was a question, Meredith. Hi, Meredith, about where do you find DBT practitioners and DBT programs, and then what ages are it appropriate for?
Yeah. So, I see people are really latching on to DBT. I'm happy to report there's a lot of growing programs in our area. I love to just Google search DBT like in your area. For those of us who are in like sort of Northern Virginia area, there's quite a few offerings now. Look for what style of program. There are DBT programs that are actually quite intensive. So if your child is having a lot of difficulty with emotional regulation and maybe has safety concerns, maybe their habitual way of responding to pain is self-injury or substance use or, really dangerous, risky behavior, you might be looking for a DBT program that is more intensive and longer term, right? So if we're saying, there's quite a lot of lagging skills, there are programs that incorporate both individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy. It's a system, right? We can't just send our kids to be treated, unfortunately, right? Like we are part of that. So, and there are wonderful programs in the area. Wait Kendall is a program in the area that can do this more intensive full DBT program, which will incorporate a lot of that. And Britt Rathbone's, there's wonderful programs in our area. the other piece is to look, a lot of practitioners like myself have found that these skills are just applicable to almost everything we do. So in my program, we offer a skills group, but we facilitate the remaining connection with your individual therapist. Because sometimes you have a great individual therapist, but you really have lagging skills and you need a skills training class, or you need to connect with other peers that are working on healthy coping behaviors, right? So look for the style of DBT program that fits your family's needs. There's quite a few options out there.
That's great. Thank you so much. And there was a question that is DBT used in conjunction with medication for depression? What's the research and efficacy of DBT? We just maybe hit that one lightly, just because I know there's a bunch of stuff that we can check out ourselves online.
Right. Yes. So, yes, you can check that out. But I think sort of the gold standard for depression, anxiety treatment is often, if there's really a genetic component, like family history, right, is some combination of medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, DBT is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy that focuses a lot more on validation in the relationship. In addition to skills training, right? So, and I saw a question, about my practice. So there's a portion of my practice that works on DBT directly training with teens. I have seen some DBT programs as young as middle school, but again, because it's so skills based, there has to be a certain level of self-monitoring and self-awareness for some of the DBT skills to be fully applicable to a kid. That doesn't mean there's not other skills we can be teaching younger kids, which we certainly do that as well. But I do offer parent consultations and parent support groups for those who are interested in DBT concepts and like to learn in this type of way, where you get a little snippet and then you want to connect with other moms or dads who are trying to implement this. So it's absolutely something that my practice provides. If you're interested, I think my email is on one of these. You can absolutely reach out by email. I can let you know.
Yeah, you can go to the next slide. I think it might have it on there. Am I right? Was there one?
Oh, I think I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's the first one if you wanted to go back. But okay. And I would recommend that for everybody. So there was a specific question about natural consequences for a kid who has trouble waking up. Might mean missing an 8 a.m. AP exam. Should I still intervene?
Oof. So that's a really tricky one, right? It's uber specific, but the idea there, again, what is the need behind that behavior? Like, why is there such difficulty activating? Right? So does your child work with a psychiatrist? Have we done testing? Have we done a sleep study? Like, is this just a really strong avoidant behavior, right? Which sleeping is a powerful tool for ignoring and getting away from things that are uncomfortable. But I would want to know, is this a chemical difficulty with activation, right? Or is this sort of a combination of behavioral? And I do think you have to meet your child where they're at. So sometimes we have to allow them to have natural consequences. Other times we have to say, okay, if you're not functioning in life or going to school at all, we need to shift up, how we are activating, right? How do we get to activation? What are the barriers to that?
Yeah, and I think there was a follow-on about staying up till 2 a.m.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Right? Like the sleep stuff.
And there was a question about, is Marsha Linehan's memoir a good start for reading about DBT? I mean, she is the architect of DBT.
Yeah,
so
I trained in her model. Yes, I have not read her memoir. I will say that. But I think she has, wonderful programs you can look online even. One benefit of the pandemic was so many of these really wonderful training programs went online. So you can sign up for some of her courses. There's lots of parent training materials that you can find online. I think that's a wonderful place to start. I also, I left that one at my office. I can have Debbie maybe send out a follow-up, but there's some really wonderful self-help books and strategies. Let me see if I actually have it. I do. I love it. Okay. I love this workbook. So this is the Dialectical Behavioral Therapy Skills Workbook. And I love it. You can buy it on Amazon. It has lots of like snippets. You can do one little skill a day. You can practice it as a family. I love this book. I use a lot of the activities in there. Okay, so Matthew McKay, Jeffrey Wood, and Jeffrey Brantley.
Okay, and Jeffrey Wood. I'm not sure if I'm spelling these correctly, everybody, but I'm okay.
Yeah, I love this one. It's just practical, easy to use.
And so I think we're just going to take one more question because we're going to run out of time. But there was one: is there a simply written resource that's geared toward teaching these skills to those who are developmentally disabled? Linehan's are geared toward college educated, or concepts are too advanced.
They are. No, that's true. There is the adolescent book. That one probably is at my office. There's an adolescent version which has pictures that go along with it. I find a lot of the visuals to be an excellent way when language is a barrier. So the adolescent workbook, it's gonna like elude me right now, but I can have Debbie send a follow-up if she will. But that has pictures involved, and I think that's a wonderful resource.
And I do have one more question very quickly, because I know this is so common. We get this all the time here too. Is, when we have a spouse or an ex that has a very different view of how we're dealing with it, highly reactive, and almost resorts to discipline. And I will only put my plug here is that, again, they're missing skills too, because they're my only skill as a parent then is to take something away, which we like, okay, how many times have we tried that? It doesn't work. So, or to yell, because in their brain, they're like, okay, so what do you do in those situations? And of course, I have an opinion, but please, Nicole, you are the expert.
Yeah, I go back to, that's my instinct is just be with that for a second, pause, and to hope kids and all of us have a default to move toward that which is just healthier, resonates as less reactive, right? And so we can't always control the different people that our kids interact with, sometimes including our own spouse. And the idea is, can I, through my own lived experience, offer an alternative corrective emotional experience? As therapists, we are invited into this all the time, right? Like, we have clients that may have really difficult family situations going on. And my role is, can I just be in this room, a calm, loving presence that can be with sort of, tough material, and offer an alternative way to approach it through my actions and through how I am, like, in the room. And that can never be taken away from you as a parent, no matter what other, right? Like, sometimes it's a teacher that's really being reactive or tough with our kids, and we can't protect them from every one of those interactions, but we can be a source of an alternative emotional experience. That's how I like to think of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was incredible, Nicole. Thank you so much. I know that we answer questions all day long, and I just want to be respectful of everybody's time, your time as well. Yeah. What a wonderful way to end the school year. And I will send out Nicole's email address and the DBT resources that you mentioned today.
I'll follow it.
And a link to the slides, as well as a link to the replay. So thank you, everybody. Once again, please put a plug out, check out our summer study skills and writing workshops. And we hope to see you here at the Study Pro. Oh, David Rosen is on, my son. And he said hi, Mom, and Nicole says hi. So this is a walk down memory lane for all of us today. So I will send all of those resources out to everybody, and we are so grateful. And just remember, Rain, next time that we're all in.
It's a practice. It's a practice.
And give yourself some gratitude, because we all need to give ourselves grace, because it's not always easy, and we're not going to always get it right. So, yeah. Nicole, thank you so much.
Lovely I hate to hang out with you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Much. Okay, thanks for all the comments.
Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.